What a rousing welcome. Thank you very much indeed, ladies and gentlemen. Now, all I ask for you this afternoon is no one goes to sleep in the front there, as I saw earlier. Most importantly, I'm here. Can I step forward?
Is that your phone?
Oh, is that my alarm clock? There we go. Is that better?
You may need to turn it off.
Okay, how about that? There's always technological difficulties. I'm here to speak to you as a father, because I have children and I want those children to have a future, and I want all of our children to have a future. And right now, as I see it, I'm very concerned for that future. My concern drove me to write a book, and I am a dyslexic. So the challenge of writing a book was a huge challenge, almost an impossible challenge. If I can do the impossible, this party can do the impossible. And I want to do and explain why. Because I see in the decade ahead some of the biggest challenges we've seen for hundreds of years to Britain and the Western way of life. And I fear unless we face and understand those challenges, we will be engulfed by them. Key to navigating our way out of this is understanding how we got into it. We don't have long to work out how to change. If we don't enact a government who can change in 2 years, we won't be prepared for what comes. So we don't have a lot of time. And what's important about this is how have we ended up with three parties, with three leaders who are indistinguishable and are unable to see what's coming or have the courage to act. Now they have responsibility, but they're also part of a cycle. We lost an empire. We tried to rebuild an empire, and Thatcher did an incredible job of powering us out of the doldrums. And we've given back an enormous amount in the past 10 years. And our question is whether we can move forward from this point and change our course or continue downwards. I hope we can change our course. But we can't do that without understanding how we got here, where we are, and where we're going. So if I may indulge 30 minutes of history, of current geopolitics, and future qualities of leadership, perhaps we can explore this. Now, I don't have a clicker, so it may have to be, are we clicking forwards? It's all going to be a bit manual, I'm afraid. What's the manual button? Can I signal you and you can just, okay. So the key to this is understanding Britain in the world around us. We can't act in isolation, and we actually have the capability to have a disproportionately positive influence on events in the bigger world. Because we built an empire, we lost an empire, and we love our history. And I'm going to keep coming back to how history can teach us things. So we will be looking at the past, the present, and the future, all in the next 30 minutes. I had to ask myself the question, does history repeat itself? And I think all of you are old enough to realize that things do repeat over time. And everyone tells you it's different, but actually many things are not different. Our ancestors have gone through cycles, we go through cycles, and if you can understand those cycles, you have a chance to master them. I called this the 5 stages of empire, not because I was an imperialist, but because empires are the biggest social structure we create. If you understand an empire, you can understand so many other things as a fractal. This curve is a curve of a power curve of an empire. It starts at the bottom here. Can you see over there if I migrate over this side and point? It starts here, it goes all the way up, and it ends up here. Whoops, I'm whining. This could be your life. You're born completely helpless. And if you're lucky to live to old age, you'll die on the right-hand side. Between those moments, you will have energy and you will have knowledge. And that combination gives you the ability to go out into the world, build your home and family, mark an influence on the world until you peak. At the top of the curve, you will wake up one day. You don't realize which day it is. And that was the peak of your power, of your influence. You will go about your affairs on that day as if nothing happened. But you will slide over the top, slowly but surely, until something irrevocable happens and you realize you will not get back up there. Your life has changed and you are in decline. You can manage decline consciously or you can deny it. I think consciously understanding it means you have choices. That's your life. Understanding your life lets you understand bigger systems, the biggest. And now you have a chance to have an opinion. So the way the system works is it in the blue, it regionalizes, it learns the best practices of the outside world, and it builds itself, driven by demographics. It moves up the curve and it powers into the world like a teenager who's finished their studies, and it makes its mark on the world and it builds. And it builds very quickly until it gets to the upper dark blue color and it reaches maturity, where tolerance and integrative behavior are the norms of all of the civilizations of man. It then peaks and it moves into overextension, the first red sector, where it can't afford to live but it doesn't know it. And then something irrevocable happens and it enters into decline. Now, are you wondering where we are on the curve? Yes or no? Do you know where we are? Do you think we're in decline? Are we in big decline or little decline? Right, okay, here's the good news. We lost our empire in 1955. That's that end of the curve, and we are now rebuilding ourselves. So let's have a look at the history that we're very proud of. Dreadnoughts, battleships, sea power. We were the first of the great sea powers and empires. There's a lot to be proud of to be British. A very unique empire, driven by a small number of people that projected power and really worked with the people that it occupied rather than actually controlled them. But we can talk about that at tea if you'd like. Moving on, next one please. This is the British Empire. We had a civil war, we broke out of regionalization. We then built our empire against the Dutch, the French, the Spanish, and we reached our peak in 1870. Never really realized it at the time, of course. And we declined and lost our system into 1955 and Suez. But we've been trying to rebuild ourselves ever since. And here's the good news. It started a long time ago. The question is do we wish and we have the willpower to continue? So, understanding empires is understanding money. This is the debt to GDP ratio versus the empire curve I just showed you. You borrow money in the first curve to build your empire. An empire is a monopoly, so in effect, you get it all back. But then you overextend and you have challenges and you start to borrow again from everyone in your system until you can't do it anymore and your empire collapses. You will notice the way the debt climbs and there is advancement for the general system. Sadly, since this curve has been produced, we've doubled our debt and gone backwards. We've been wasting money and not enhancing our collective future. That is a travesty that needs to be corrected. We are not just one country. We are part of a Western system, and I couldn't understand why the Western empires had shorter durations than any other historical empires. And then I realized our empires weren't based on nations, they were based on our belief. We were the greater Western Christian empire. And that religious belief bonded the national empires sequentially. And starting on the left, you start with the Dutch, the Spanish, the French in blue. The biggest one, no surprises, is the white one, it's the British. And then two challengers from Germany and America on the far side. This is the huge implication. America is well and truly in decline. It is the last of the Western Christian empires. We passed our power to them because much as we laugh at them at times, they are similar to us. So the change was relatively fluid. There is no one left for America to pass its power to, and when America finally goes, our whole way of life will go with it. We sit in this decade at a 500-year power change. So when we're talking about gay marriages, we're missing the point. We should be talking about how we create a system, a country that is able to survive these changes with the implications I'm about to describe to you. To do that, I'm going to take my 5 stages theory and I'm going to go and look at the present, if you could please. The present, this picture, has Chinese marching sailors. If you haven't worked it out, China is rising. in the most profound way. I represent that rise by sailors because it understands it wishes to replace America as a global sea power as America replaced us. This isn't something that's going to happen in 20 years or 30 years. It's been happening for 10 years, and they are doing it right now. And the aggression in cyber espionage and the whole strategy around the Pacific Basin is the same manifestation that we saw in the 30s and early on in the 20th century. It is the same pattern that, if not met with confidence, with economic security and strong defense, could have the same terrifying implications. So let's look at why I think this. If you could wind it forward, please. I'm going to look at this picture because I know you're feeling left out over here. Excuse me, over there. Right. I need you to understand in a short period of time that age and demographics are the same for a person versus a country or an empire. If you expand, your policies will be expansive. And if you have contractive demographics, you are old. Russia is old. Japan is old. We are very marginal in our second reincarnation. That drives where you are on the cycle I showed you. And as you grow, you need commodities. Please take away one thing. People go to war for one reason: resources. They don't go to war for anything but resources. But what they do is they polarize their people, which is this one down here, in such a way as they will work together to win that conflict. And that's where religious belief and nationalism comes in. It's a secondary function of needing resources. And China needs resources like no nation on earth does today. Moving around the corner, polarization is a road to war that leads to conflict. And I do believe the road we're walking on is no different from the early 20th century and the 30s. And we need to understand why and what we can do. Key to this is demographics. Japan and Russia down here, flat as a pancake. That's why I say they're relatively inert, despite their best attempts. America is predominantly inert with the European population, and immigration will only make things worse for it. And climbing up the curve, there is China. China's demographics are immensely positive until 2025. We've got to survive until 2025 as they rise and move out into the world. It's very important to understand. After that, we have time. Before that, we don't have time. And India is behind China. Can be an ally, but no ability to change events. Next one, please. Looking at the world, understanding where we are, regionalization, Africa, the Middle Eastern Civil War will go on for years until they, like we did and America and China did, complete it to decide which entity, which values win. Our foreign policy has to understand it's not our civil war, and how we interact with it is dangerous. Latin America and India are relatively benign but need to be watched. China is climbing up the blue curve and has been doing it since 1996. This is not a yesterday event. And on the other side, there's America sliding down, and over here, Europe is doing something very strange, which we will come on to. Europe. Regionalization is driven by expanding demographics. It agglomerates small into big and gives them advantage. Through a process following the Cold War, Europeans think you can force countries with negative demographics together and it's going to stick. There is no issue whatsoever that Europe will tear itself apart. We won't have to leave it because, in my opinion, it's leaving us. It's leaving everyone. What we have to do is bail out of the sinking ship before it takes us with it. There is a real sense of urgency. That's where this party comes in. It has a real table to do that. I'm going to look at what that policy means for other policies as we move into the future. Could we have the next one, please? America is declining. It is not an ally. is the way we think of it, but we would like to see it stronger. By leading our country effectively, we might give them the example they need to change their course. And when you look at the debt curve, they have no one to pass their power to. So they are going to keep spending and keep printing until someone pulls the plug. And as America pulled the plug on Britain, China will pull the plug on America at the wrong time. So debt is never going to be paid by America to the people that give it the loans, and the same for Europe. And actually, when I first advocated it, I put my hands on my ears. We have no policy but to restructure our Western debt. Because if we restructure it, we can lower our taxes and we can re-stimulate our economy. Otherwise, we are dead in the water and we will never recover. Does this sound like someone's party agenda? Next one, please. Right, let's have a quick look at the challenge of Asia to understand what we're dealing with. Next one, please. Asia didn't just pop up. China isn't just suddenly there. It started with the Japanese. They were much like the Spanish. And the Chinese are like us. They're a sea power, they're industrialized, except for they're demographically really powerful. And you've got to think of India like the French. Lots of aspiration, but they won't manifest their power the way they think. Okay. Next one, please. This is a Chinaman. He's digging coal because it's about resources. And the next chart is the one I want you to really understand, the one that scares me. This is a man called Kondratiev, a Russian economist who recognized a commodity cycle that lasted 54 years. And he identified that every 54 years, the resource competition became so great, there was conflict. The next conflict door is 2020 to 2025. And why I say I don't think we have time is unless we get our house in order, we don't have a strong economy and we can't protect our ideals and values the way we need to. And the fastest way to war is to be weak before it. The fastest way to peace is to prepare for it. America currently rules the waves with carriers, as we once did battleships. But if you look at the PLA, they seek methods to remove this power source, and they are doing it in front of our eyes. Pick up the internet and look at their ballistic missile systems designed to take out carriers. This is a well-developed arms race that most people are not aware of. If you go to Portsmouth, I dare you to find 2 sailors from the Royal Navy who look this intent. And there are 250,000 sailors in the PLA. They mean business. And that means we need to get our house in order quickly so our children can live peacefully. So what does our future look like? In effect, I mentioned to you the Thatcher era was the first impulse to start our regional cycle again. And it was a phenomenon. In truth, I think she was an aberration. We were lucky to have her. And we have squandered and we have watched that legacy squandered for over a decade. And we now reach this point. And this isn't a we would like, this isn't a could we have, this is a must-have moment. We can either carry on and literally give everything away, or we can change, and the values that you represent in this room can be espoused by the majority in our country, and we can start to move upwards again, and as an example to Europe and America. If you look at the average income of middle classes, and the reality is empires grow middle classes when they expand, and they collapse middle classes when they contract. We have a whole generation who's going backwards. Is it really a wonder that that generation is disenfranchised with our current leadership? And that is the advantage that this party has if it frames its challenge correctly. And so far it is. But it needs perhaps to go further to bring more people in. So let's look at some of these things. The rise of China is a threat. We need to separate from Europe to give us the choice to become strong again. That needs to happen yesterday. Our reality, though, is we don't have positive demographics. They're just about neutral. So this tide isn't going to lift us without planning. And we're not like Russia with commodities that gets a free option to stay alive. Actually, we don't have a lot going for us, but we have one thing going for us, and that is our history. We're an educated population. We have so much to be proud of. We all watch history programs. So we love our history, and therefore we're open to learning the real lessons of our ancestors and applying them, I hope. History is our resource. And as a result of that resource, I do think the British population is actually ready for a new honesty. You are all highly educated. You don't want to be treated like idiots. You want to have the real picture and know you're led with a sense of honesty and vision that has a chance of working. And we don't have that at the moment. Leadership is key in this. I couldn't help but study the way empires grew and collapsed. And here's the real shock. Empires are built by individuals who go out and take risk. They're effective. They build their own empires. They become wealthy. They return that wealth to the empire or the group, and then they end up leading it in politics. And those people tend to be a little maverick, a little different, but they are seriously effective, and they change the lives of the society they live in. But then as you get to the top, and the institutions build, they become untenable, too different, and they become pushed out, until the types of people that lead the decline have never built anything, but come from a political class, and don't really know how the world works. That's the reality we're in. Their biggest failure is their inability to see what's coming, and even if they do, they cannot act decisively. And that brings us to the leadership we need. UKIP has been a party of protest. I watched that protest, and I'm fascinated to watch its success. But there's a transition that needs to be made, and I think UKIP needs to be leading this country at the next general election. I don't think you should just want it. I think you and everyone else needs to realize we need it. And that's what's so important about this, is that the transition has to be not just about Europe, which is correct, fight and break away from Europe to gain freedom. But as Nigel said earlier, that's just the beginning of our problem. So we better start getting our head around what it takes to revitalize our economy, to be able to actually have a system that encourages individuality to create wealth, and then apply that wealth to the protection of our values and those that we consider friends. It's a tall order. Believe me, are our chances of doing this high? No. But I do think we've come to this stage in our society when something really magical could happen. It started, and the trick is to continue it. So I'd like to talk about a few policies that you might want to consider. The first is, and I humble myself in suggesting it, a lesson from America, our younger cousins. Up until that time, all of the European countries had their population born into the nation they belonged to. But America was a population of immigrants from every part of the world, yet they bonded to become American. They represent the first inclusive Western society. They did it by sharing their values that transcended their birthrights. They had a constitution. And Britain now faces an environment where not everyone who lives here is by gene British. But anyone who lives here needs to understand we have beliefs and values that we believe in strongly, and if you wish to share them, you are very welcome to be here. We need to create the equivalent of a British constitution. A constitution that reasserts us in the new cycle. We've had one for a long time as a democracy. This is our new cycle, and we need to reassert it because the quality and character of our society has changed. And this is the mark where you lay it down. And that's a very important step for what I'm going to suggest next. Key to that, essential policies. Are you all familiar with inflation and what it does to you? You will remember stagflation in the 70s. That was our economy slowing down and the inflation catching up and rear-ending us. This is different. This is someone else's inflation because the East is growing its infrastructure and we've imported it and we have no control over it. And you have all lived in negative real growth for over 5 years, which is why you are poorer as a result of it. Unless our growth outstrips the imported inflation, we're finished. And we have to do that really quickly. So it's not an option of having 3% growth or 4% growth. We need big numbers and we need some dramatic actions to create those because otherwise we are dying inch by inch. And that's why our middle classes are being squeezed so heavily. And we need to be prepared for this inflation to return soon and with a vengeance, I'm afraid. Debt. Quite simply, I think Britain should restructure its debt before anyone else. Every Western country will have to do it, and it will default at the worst time. Do it by choice. It lets you lower taxes. It lets you re-stimulate the economy. And that's exactly what Ireland did, and no one had complained about their policy, so why shouldn't we? Extend our debt, lower our burden. We need real GDP growth. We need to empower entrepreneurs. We are not all born equal. Some people have the ability to create and others benefit. And if you take those people out of society, you collapse. If you encourage them, you support them and you shape them, you can make a super society. We need to work on that. We lower our taxes to a flat structure. I'm feeling like a politician up here, sorry. And we also need to attract foreign capital. If you do this first, the foreign capital comes first and you end up with a super boost. We came off the gold standard before America and Germany in the 30s and we benefited enormously. The first mover advantage is huge. Out of Europe, flat taxes, restructure your debt. And another thing, why can't we lend to small businesses these days? Seriously, how does this system continue? I come from finance and I'm appalled at the bank's inability to encourage small businesses to grow. That's where your fertile roots for entrepreneurialism are, and they need a really good kicking to make sure that happens going forwards. I've almost finished. Energy policy. Why has America had a shale gas revolution and we haven't? Can anyone answer that one for me? And defense. Okay, all the bogeymen are coming out. Right, I'm going to talk about defense, probably my hottest topic. We were a sea power, we have destroyed our navy, and the Chinese are building the most powerful navy the world's ever seen. Bigger than America, Britain, anyone. What we do have, though, is amazingly, we have some of the best technology anywhere in the world. We have the best Type 45 air defense destroyers. We have the best submarines. We just have to make more of them. More of them makes our island safer. So my last slide. One of the reasons why we are currently led by individuals, how can I say this politely, who shouldn't be there, is because our society has forgotten what real leadership is. And it suddenly struck me, you will remember real leaders, whether you agreed with them or not. But this younger generation have forgotten what real leadership is. So I tried to create this image, and I called it iconic leadership. Iconic because you learn from the people that you remember. And there were 4 principles. One of them I heard today, which I love to hear. When you lead, you serve the people you lead. When you choose your leaders in any part of life, if those people serve themselves, they are not leading you. Leadership is a form of service. It's really important. You ask, does this person tick the box? But the next thing your leader needs is vision and good judgment in choosing which vision they follow. So you need vision and judgment. And then you need courage, because pulling us out of where we are is going to be hard work. It's going to be tough. It's going to ask questions. And in a society that gets information instantly, only the strong and courageous are going to make that work. And that's beyond one individual. You need a group of people, which comes on to the type of people that need to be attracted into the party of governance that UKIP, I hope, will become. And that is people that have built and achieved, that come from outside the political framework and know how to build something and can do that on the basis of a country. And next, a leader needs to empower its people. We are not a dictatorship. We never will be. The qualities of individuality make British people and our values very unique. But empowered, as we found in the Battle of Britain, and I'm not wearing my Battle of Britain cufflinks for nothing today, we can do amazing things, and we can do amazing things as a nation. It's also important to remember the lesson of two people. Thatcher and Churchill were crisis leaders. I have incredible admiration for what they both achieved. And they weren't perfect as human beings, but they dragged us through and out of impossible situations. But they both made a mistake. Society demands heroes and leaders in crisis, but once it gains stability, it requires collective empowerment. So there are two phases of leadership we need. Crisis leadership for our survival, and we mustn't forget that when we're out of the crisis and into the steady state, we need a much more empowered form of government which brings everyone in, which prevents us swinging back into trouble again. And that's a vision I would like to leave with you today when you think about our future. Thank you very much.